You're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam. Streaming on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and at DCAUreview.com. Now, here's today's episode.
Season's greetings, and welcome to episode 85 of the DCAU Review. I'm one of your hosts, Cal, and with me is the other host of our program, my good brother, Liam. Liam, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, happy anything else that you celebrate this season. Excited for this week's episode because we are covering a holiday classic.
That is the right word for it, Cal. A absolute classic. We are, of course, covering on this week's show to celebrate the holidays, the wonderful episode of Justice League entitled Comfort and...
That's right, Comfort and Joy. So this is a unique episode in that it breaks up the format of your typical original Justice League series. Most of the original episodes were two-parters, some three-parters, obviously, in a couple of cases. But this is a standalone, single half-hour, self-contained, enjoyable, holiday-themed episode that takes place and deals with the majority of our 7. 5 out of the 7 are featured on this episode. But before we get into the plot, why don't we get the official IMDB synopsis? I can never say that right. The IMDB synopsis of this episode, Comfort and Joy, which first aired 16 years ago, back on December 13th, 2003, on the Cartoon Network. Liam.
Yeah, we just passed the 16th anniversary of it. And this is the IMDb synopsis, as you mentioned, Cal, for the episode Comfort and Joy, which was written by Paul Dini and directed by Butch Lukic. And that synopsis reads as such. Members of the Justice League celebrate Christmas. That's it.
Well, they definitely could have done a better job. I'm going to give that one probably the lowest ranking we've had for an IMDb synopsis. So that'll leave us on our own to describe the plot before we start jumping into it and discussing our rankings. But Liam, this plot, the episode starts off on a distant alien planet where the Justice League saves these creatures. I don't even know what they are, or I think they give them a name at some point, but I don't have a recollection of what they're called. But the Justice League is saving their planet from being crushed by another snowy planet or something. They're going to ram into each other. Just happens to be a snow wintry planet that they're on. As soon as they wrap this up, they realize that it's Christmas Eve, wouldn't you know it? So Clark, Superman, decides he's going to invite Jean back home to Kansas with him. He's going to Smallville because Jean expresses that he has no feelings about this. Obviously, he's a Martian. He's an alien. Of course, he doesn't have any Christmas feelings or understand what Christmas spirit is. So Clark's going to introduce him to tradition and the traditions of the Smallville way of celebrating Christmas. And then we get Flash has his own storyline where he's got to find a much coveted DJ Rubba Duckie toy for the orphans of Central City and the Central City Orphanage. And then we get a Green Lantern and Hawkgirl story where they fly off world to some planet where they go start a bar brawl, of course, because how else would Hawkgirl celebrate Christmas but
naturally
by brawling with a bunch of aliens at a brawl. So we get these 3 different storylines going on simultaneously, and really the only one with any sort of real tension seems to be the Flash, who is desperate to find this toy, finds the final toy supposedly in the world by traveling to Japan where it's being produced, or China. I think it's Japan, right? Was it Japan or China?
I think it's Japan because they show the mountain or the volcano in the background.
Okay, yeah, I thought it was Japan. So he travels to Japan, picks up this toy, brings it back to Central City, and just happens to stumble upon Ultra Humanite, who's up to no good on Christmas Eve. And then
he's attacking
the toy gets
a modern art museum. That's the best part of it for me. He's not robbing a bank. He just doesn't like modern art, and so he's just And they even have like funny dialogue where Flash is like, "Oh my gosh, he's already destroyed the place," and Human Knight's like, "Actually, I haven't started yet." So there's like this weird drive-by commentary on modern sort of expressionist art, which I thought was very funny.
That is good. Now, of course, you mentioned this is written by Paul Dini, who we have not reviewed a ton of episodes, maybe not even any yet, that he wrote for Justice League. So it does have that Dini flair of sort of off-the-wall humor. What did you think of this episode? The 3 different storylines. Did you have a favorite storyline? If I had to guess, I could probably guess what your favorite storyline is. But what did you like about this episode, and what did you think of these 3 different storylines?
Yeah, I think it's great, and I think it's everything in this episode is what you want out of a holiday special of your favorite show, whatever that is. If it's a sitcom, if it's a hour-long drama, or if it's a cartoon in this case, I think this has everything that you want in a holiday special. We learn some lessons along the way. We get the sense of togetherness, and there's even sort of a Scrooge-esque character in the Ultra Humanite who sees the error of his ways thanks to the Flash. So it checks kind of all of the boxes that you would want for like I said, for a Christmas special, a holiday special. So yeah, I loved it. I think obviously the Martian Manhunter story is probably my favorite for a lot of different reasons. I do really love the Flash stuff too, though, just because I think there's some really good dialogue, and we can get into some of this in voice acting later, certainly. But once the toy has been destroyed and the Flash is kind of making his case to the Ultra Humanite about, these kids, he's doing this, as you mentioned, to get these kids from the Central City orphanage a toy they really want. And he talks about wanting to spread goodwill in the hopes that these kids will be able to grow up and they will in turn spread goodwill to others. And it's like, that's a really sweet, simple message. And I think that really works well. And again, the idea that the spirit of the season wins over even the most hardened criminal masterminds is really sweet and nice. And then the Hawkgirl and Green Lantern stuff, I guess, is this their first date?
I guess
unofficially.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what you clearly have the romantic undertones to it and the flirtation that has happened. Obviously, we haven't covered every single episode, but the budding romance has been there for a while at this point, and they certainly a flirtatious snowball fight, and then the setup of the bar brawl and how Hawkgirl incites it and sort of gets John in trouble while inciting the riot, and then cuddling up to him at the end and giving him a nice little smooch on the cheek at the end. Yeah, I guess you could classify that as their first date, right?
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, overall, I think it's great. Obviously, like I said, I think the Jean, the Martian Manhunter stuff in Smallville is really sweet because he's, as you mentioned, kind of the Charlie Brown of this piece. He doesn't quite understand what the fuss is about with this Christmas season, with this holiday season, and throughout the episode, he first, through interacting with the Kents, seeing a different side of Superman than he's ever seen before, and then through eventually going out into the town of Smallville and getting to actually experience some of the Christmas cheer that is out there in the town, whether that be sort of the child who really wants to believe in Santa, or some people who just sort of wave to him as he's standing on the street, and then eventually he goes to a church and he hears singing, and that's when it kind of clicks for him finally what the season is about and what it all means. Not that it's an overtly religious message, but the general messages, as I mentioned, of what you want in the holiday special, of spreading cheer and joy and goodwill to your fellow man, or your fellow Martian in this case. And I just think all around it's such a great episode, and I keep repeating myself, but I really can't think of a better way to say it. it's especially great as a holiday edition of this show.
Agreed. We've already reviewed the only other in continuity holiday episode that we've reviewed thus far has been Christmas with the Joker, which was way back at episode 2, which you can hear in the archives at DCAUreview.com if you wish to check that out. But we talked about during that episode how that episode nostalgically means a lot to us, but as far as an overall episode and plot, and certainly the feelings, the warmth, and it's not really a warm fuzzy feeling episode. It deals with a lot of the Joker being crazy and attempting to kill people's parents, and attempting to kill Batman, and there's a lot of murder involved in that episode. Not a whole lot of murder during this Justice League episode here. The stakes aren't very high, but that lends to it and certainly makes it feel a little more laid back and a little less. It was what was needed, I think, for the episode. The highest the stakes get is Flash going to get a toy to this to this orphanage or not? And when he does, is it going to be in one piece, or is he going to disappoint the kids? So, I think that's great. There was a couple of cool little plot things, of course. I'm sure we'll discuss in the voice acting when it comes to Superman and his childlike appreciation of Christmas and still believing in Santa, apparently. I liked that as Martian Manhunter was walking about town and in an attempt to sort of understand Christmas and the Christmas spirit, they gave a nod to the classic Martian Manhunter is addicted to Oreos bit, which if you're not familiar with this, just Google Martian Manhunter Oreos. He has a large, long, historic comic book history as far as his addiction to Oreos, or what the DC equivalent to Oreos are.
Yeah, I think they have a fake name for them, but yeah, it's
they're called like Chocos or something like that. Yeah, but it was cool that they were able to slip that in there, and certainly you get 3 different phases of John. If you didn't realize, you have his classic superhero version, you get the human version, and that by the end of the episode, he's in his full natural alien Martian mode, and fully and totally appreciating Christmas and the Christmas spirit. But it's fun. It's a good episode. It's self-contained. I think of the 3 arcs, certainly Green Lantern and Hawkgirl is the weakest of the 3. I think that it's nice, and it sort of advances them as characters together, and certainly advances their romance plot, which is good because the rest of the episode doesn't do much to advance the other 2 characters. That gives a little backstory to Martian Manhunter and reminds you of Superman. That the Clark Kent character is so vital and important to who Superman is, but it doesn't really add much depth or anything. This episode could be taken out of the continuity and wouldn't necessarily be missed for the other characters, but it does. The story arc for Green Lantern and Hawkgirl does, like you say, play in later on, and could be their first date here. So all that considered, it's a little nitpicky, but I feel like just the Hawkgirl Green Lantern thing brought my score down just a tad, just because it's a little bit goofy, and I feel like I was disappointed. We can talk about it in visual and animations, but I was disappointed there weren't more cameos and a giant alien bar in the middle of DC space. That there weren't some cameos. I could have used a Lobo cameo. I think could have brought this score up a little bit, but I went a very, very strong, very solid 9 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I went with the perfect 10 out of 10 myself.
Oh, there you go.
It's like I said, I think it ticks all the boxes so well and presents a really nice, sweet message that, again, I think you can appreciate as we are here as adults, but that if a kid is watching this, they can still see it and just sort of appreciate it on the surface level as well. So I think it does what it sets out to do really well.
There we go. All right, William, second category that we will tackle today is visuals and animation. What did you like about this episode as far as the things that we got to see?
Well, it's funny because, as you mentioned, with the stakes being so low, there's very little action. Other than a brief fight between Flash and Ultra Humanite, and the Justice League building this device at the very start of the episode to keep the planets from crashing into each other. It's mostly just sort of people talking or people walking around, or obviously there's a little bit of the bar brawl on with Hawkgirl and Green Lantern, but it's really interesting to me because it's such a non-action episode here in what was still obviously a cartoon meant for kids, but I wouldn't say that's to its detriment. I think the opening sequence is really, really well done. The weather effects are very impressive. It doesn't look like it's just, the same snow, or they flashed like water crashing, waves crashing on the shore. It doesn't look like it's just sort of an animated GIF that's being played over and over again. Some really cool effects there. A lot of great #Kate movement. Oh, that's right, it's back. And and
not a moment too soon.
Not a moment too soon. And then, I like the visuals of Jean's sort of trip through Smallville. That speaks more to like the background design and some of that stuff of him, going through the very, very small old town with the general store and the little diners and the church and everything that he sees, all being very cool and really well designed. As you mentioned, we didn't get a ton of Easter eggs. The Swamp Thing does walk by in the background of the bar at one point, and we do get a couple of other small cameos. Actually, in Martian Manhunter it's mentioned that Supergirl is out of town, which is why she's not home. She's off skiing with some girl named Barbara. I'm not sure who that might be, but on her bed she has a couple of stuffed animals. One is a big cameo, which is Zook, who was the Martian Manhunter in like his original comic appearances. It was like his little sidekick.
Nice.
Who, if I had to guess, was probably a stand-in for some sort of ethnic minority, based on the way his dialogue was written in the panels I looked up.
Oh boy!
But he was an alien.
Okay.
So we can ignore that subtext if we want to. And
oh boy!
But yeah, he was this wacky little sidekick that not quite a. He was a sidekick, but he kind of got lumped in, I think, with like the Bat-Mites and people like that who were sort of left behind once we came out of that Silver Age of comics. But it was cool to see him. And there's also a Wile E. Coyote stuffed animal on the bed, which
I did see that,
which is a nice little bit as well. So yeah, I would agree. I could have used a few other cameos. I mean, there are some quote unquote cameos that were probably more likely just reused models. Like, I think one of the guards from In Blackest Night is in the background, and it looked like maybe one of the girls who was like on remember the robot girls? We haven't reviewed that episode, but the robot girls who are with Lobo on the Collector's ship, it looked like one or two of them were in the background. Okay. So, but again, that may have more just been reusing old models that they had lying around more than shoehorning in cameos. That being said, because the story did not require a lot of strong, a lot of over-the-top action, it was very tough for me to rate this because there's nothing bad visually in it, but there's also nothing particularly spectacular. Like I said, I really like the opening scene. Some of the lighting effects they do, like at the end when Ultra Humanite has the little tree and in his room, the lighting effects on his face and stuff are very cool.
Agreed.
But I had trouble really coming up with a score, but because, like I said, there was some good and I couldn't really find any bad, I kept it really strong and I went with a 9 out of 10.
All right, it is strong. I would concur with you. I think, like I said, my biggest disappointment is just the lack of cameos in a scene that was made for cameos. and intergalactic bar fight. I mean, you could have had a lot of reoccurring characters or people that have come back. You could have had, maybe not somebody as big as a Mongol or something like that, but you had a whole episode called War World where it's a bunch of aliens fighting each other. I mean, well, why on earth would you not have some of those aliens featured there, or just some lesser known DC cameos in there would have been fun. Just sort of kind of winks or nods. So I said,
where's my space cabbie? Yeah,
exactly. Or Space Chimp, or Detective Chimp rather, or
Adam Strange.
Yep. This, like I said, this was a perfect spot for you to bring in Lobo for 2 minutes, have him, have Brad Garrett cut Brad Garrett a paycheck to come in and deliver 3 or 4 lines. And give a little chuckle comic relief to this area. But I mean, yeah, that's certainly was a disappointment to me. But that's beggars can't be choosers. That was the C level story for me. I think also you failed to mention another cameo is Streaky the Super Cat makes her reappearance. Here, I believe she was featured in at least one of the Supergirl episodes before, but reappearing and becoming fast friends with Jean at the end. We also had DJ Rubba Duckie's design. We didn't get a chance to talk about that.
Oh yes,
the rapping farting duck who dances. I did appreciate Ultra Humanite's adjustments to him so that he talks more refined and has the voice of Ultra Humanite at the end after he fixes him to tell the story of the Nutcracker.
Yes,
I thought that that Flash putting Ultra Humanite in a top hat and calling him like the ugly snowman or whatever he calls him,
Freaky the Snowman, I believe.
Freaky the Snowman, yeah, it's just tremendous.
Yes.
Ultra Humanite, please just take me to jail. This is so good. I think you were spot on. Also, be a little more on the more serious side. Something we don't talk about a lot is some of the painted backgrounds, especially once it's been switched over to the digital animation. But I feel like that really set the atmosphere, especially for the scenes in Smallville. Whether it's the snowy night as on Christmas Eve as John is walking through, or the Christmas morning as the Kents wake up and hear John singing, and there's a flash to the outside of the Kent farm, and the snow has stopped, and the sun is rising, and there's snow on the mailbox, and it's the Kent house is there. There's a tree in the foreground, and it's just a really, really well done, well painted design work there. And I think that I don't disagree with you. It's strong. Your point is certainly valid. There wasn't a lot of action, but there wasn't a lot of action needed. So with that, I kept the score strong as well. I went with a solid 8 out of 10 for visuals and animation. Plus, we didn't even get to talk about Hawkgirl's cool jacket.
That's true. Right, as we mentioned, she's on a snow planet, so she wears like a nice jacket to keep warm.
But not John. He's full nips out on this.
Yep.
This planet doesn't matter.
I guess the Martian. Well, they don't like heat. They don't like fire. I guess cold is fine with them.
Yeah. I one last visual gag was the fact that the sweater that Ma Kent gives to Jean was too big, so he uses his. She's like, "Oh, we weren't sure what size it is," and he makes the gag is he enlarges himself and makes the gag that he'll grow into it, which was
and it also happened to have the Charlie Brown design on it. So
there you go. Very
sure
subtle.
That wasn't an accident. Yeah.
Is this the first appearance of the human version of Jean also?
I think so. Because obviously that's obviously in stuff we haven't reviewed yet. He does sort of later on decide to go down to Earth and try to figure out who he is as a person. And we see him take this form again. I believe he also takes it in Starcrossed at one point. So, this is we don't really ever get like a traditional Detective John Jones like you may have seen in the New Frontier movie or some of the other versions of Martian Manhunter. Certainly if you saw him in some of the live action appearances he's had. But I think this is the first time we've seen him like create an identity. It wasn't him just shape changing into another person or creature.
There you go. All right, well, so let's move on to our category number 3, which would be music. I didn't have a lot of notes for music. The only, of course, the main musical standout point was Jean's song at the end, his Martian, whatever kind of song that was, which I thought was certainly unique, but was a nice little ad, and certainly the Kents and all enjoyed it as well. Do you have any interesting notes or anything in music that you wanted to notate?
Yeah, we'll just mention here, as we're talking about music, the score was by Lolita Ritmanis. And some of the only music notes I had were, one, as I already mentioned, that scene at the end where Flash presents Ultra Humanite with an aluminum Christmas tree. I thought the music, as Ultra Humanite turns on the lights and is sort of smiling and watching the show, and you see Flash kind of peering back in just to see Ultra Humanite enjoying himself. I thought the music there was really sweet. I liked the music when Jean is going around Smallville. Again, like I said, it's very atmospheric, and you're right in the sense that there's not a lot of like specific themes like we talk about when there's a villain theme or when an episode has its own kind of unique musical stylings. But I think the music is still pretty perfect, because if it was more overbearing, I think it might have distracted from some of it. And because this is such a story and dialogue heavy episode, I actually think it was to the episode's advantage that the music kind of held back. And like I said, there's some sweet moments, like in the jail cell or at the end after the bar fight is over, as you mentioned, and Hawkgirl gives John a kiss on the cheek and tells him Merry Christmas. There's kind of some sweet music that kind of brings in that GL Hawkgirl theme that I think we heard in the Savage Time, maybe the first time.
Okay.
But that's been played before. It's sort of, I guess, their love theme or whatever. But overall, and then there's, as you mentioned, there's Jean. The pipes on Carl Lumbly were very impressive to me, especially singing this sort of weird Martian chant. And and I actually do really love the choice of song for when he goes to the church in here. That's actually one of it came upon a midnight clear, which is one of my personal favorite Christmas songs. So that kind of bumped my score up. But like I said, even though the music is not super strong, and I guess we should talk about DJ Rubba Duckie's rap, which is something else.
I can't wait to discuss the voice of DJ Rubba Duckie also. Yes.
But yeah, it's something else. So like I said, I think the music for what it needed to do in this episode was pretty perfect. So I actually gave it a perfect 10 out of 10.
Oh, wow. We are well on our way here to a very, very high score. I like I said, I didn't have a ton of musical notes noted there. I think you're right. I think the music as Jean walks through the snowy Kansas evening on Christmas Eve is the one that stuck out the most to me. There's some music that's played during the snowball fight also between Hawkgirl and Green Lantern, which I thought was solid. I didn't think there was anything bad about the music. There were those notes were the ones that I had made a point at mentioning. So I went with a solid. Again, we're solid. We're not anything bad here. I went out a 7 out of 10 for music. Not enough for this. Don't disagree with you. So I'm not pulling out the disagreement alarm. But yeah. All right, let's move to our final category of the day, Liam. That is going to be voice acting, and we have quite the crew this week. Let's talk about our voice actors.
Yeah, and we'll of course get to our main Justice Leaguers last. But as you mentioned, quite a few guest stars. We have the returning Ian Buchanan as Ultra Humanite, who is just a delight in this episode.
He's really good.
Like, they really couldn't have. I was trying to think if they could have picked a better villain for that spot with the Flash, where it's like they couldn't do Grodd or Luthor because they're like too evil to have a heart because it's Christmas. So I feel like Humanite though, is kind of that, because as we mentioned, when we meet him, he's destroying a modern art museum in what he calls a public service. And like we said, Flash gives him this speech about, trying to give goodwill to these kids so they can grow up and pass it on to others. And I love when Flash asks if the toy's going to blow up, and he just deadpan goes, "Flash, it is Christmas."
Yeah.
I think he's great. And the scene at the end with, as we mentioned, with the tree, as he, he tells Flash that he had a tree just like it when he was a child, and how it's real. He's really, really good here. And then we have a returning Mike Farrell and Shelley Fabares as Pan Ma Kent. It
was cool that they, even for this little bit part, that they went out, and that's one of the great things about the continuity of the DC universe, the DCAU specifically, is that they keep the characters voiced most of the time by the same people, which makes it feel familiar, which makes it feel, important. And they, these are the same characters that you got to know in Superman the Animated Series.
Yeah, and my feelings about I've not always been kind to Mr. Farrell as podcast, but I think for this episode, this is exactly what you want Superman's parents to be like, and to talk like, and to act like. So I think and again, it's, as you mentioned, a pretty small role anyway, but I love Ma giving Jean the sweater, as you mentioned, and Pa and Clark arguing over who's going to turn the lights on the Christmas tree on. And,
I was watching it last night, and I had to stop and message you when I heard that line. Pa, that's my job. Yeah, just so good.
Great. And then a fun little bit, as we mentioned, as Flash goes to the factory to get the very last DJ Rubba Duckie toy in the world, talks to a man named Mr. Hana, who just happens to be voiced by Robert Ito, who we just talked about a few weeks ago, was the voice of Kyodai Ken / the Ninja.
Oh wow!
So even the bit player, one of the bit players this week was an old voice from a past episode. So, and then of course we have our main cast. Like you said, it's not the full 7. We don't really know what's going on. We don't hear any mentions of Wonder Woman, at least not directly. We know Batman is on monitor duty at the Watchtower, and so we have our 5 remainers here. We have Maria Canales as Hawkgirl. We have Phil Lamar as John Stewart, Green Lantern, Cara Lumley as the Martian Manhunter, Michael Rosenbaum as the Flash, and George Newbern as Superman. And everybody's pretty great. Like we said, this is obviously another big growing episode, a big character development episode for the Martian Manhunter. But like I said, I was really, really impressed with Michael Rosenbaum's performance here, because he probably has the most depth, other than maybe Cara Lumley, where he has to go through a lot of different emotions and really kind of makes the emotional pitch of the episode, again, of like explaining why you give gifts. It's not just to give them a toy, but to spread goodwill and cheer. And I thought, again, that could come off so hokey and silly and like an old G.I. Joe PSA or something, but it's pulled off really well. But I thought our main cast was pretty exceptional this week.
Yeah, I think that overall everybody does a really good job. Cara Lumley, having to be that emotionless at some point, sometimes, for most of the story, Alien is certainly not an easy task always, and he creates a sympathetic character, but still keeps that alien distant. I don't understand what this means, and it's funny. It sort of parallels in some way the episode that we covered last Christmas, which you can hear in the archives at DCAUreview.com, which was a Batman the Brave and the Bold episode, Invasion of the Secret Santas. And in that episode, Red Tornado is the one that is trying to understand and find Christmas spirit. And that was he was voiced by, of course, Corey Burton, the GOAT.
Yes.
But that similar idea of he's a Red Tornado is a robot, Carl Lumbly's an alien. Neither of them quite understand what Christmas spirit is or why Christmas is so important, and they're trying to find that. And they both have a similar redemption story at the end, and both, I think, are able to invoke that sort of, how if aliens did exist, would you try and help them understand just why Christmas is what it is, and and why it feels that way, and the fact that they both, and especially in this episode, Carl Lumbly is able to sort of go through this arc of not having an understanding of what it is, and then making it all the way to the end where he's able to he's singing his Martian song was great. Pa and Ma Kent with Clark are great. I thought George Newbern was exceptional in the few lines that he has. There's several lines in this episode that we repeat still, which are still great. And
this is up there with the most quoted episodes between you and I before we were ever doing this podcast. I think this "You Mean Santa Wrapped Them" is.
Yep,
was definitely one that's probably been repeated as much as almost any line from any of these shows between the two of us. So,
Pa and Ma Kent wrapping the presents in lead paper is great, and him still trying to use his X-ray vision to peek through the presents, then confounded with lead.
Yes.
so such a good bit and delivered perfectly by George Newbern, who, by the way, does double duty here as he plays the voice of DJ Rubba Duckie also.
I wasn't sure who it was. That's great.
Yep, which is pretty great. Yeah. Multi-talented George Newbern here. If you haven't heard the DJ Rubba Duckie song, go out of your way to hear this, because it is quite the treat. We're certainly down the rabbit hole here. All that to say, it's solid. It's fun. I think you're spot on with Rosenbaum as delivering the heartfelt, no, but come on, appealing to Ultra Humanites' humanity, as it were. I think it's great. We already talked about Ian Buchanan's performance. Everyone does a solid job. Even some of the characters, we've picked on Maria Canals before, maybe not having strong debuts in certain episodes. I think she's shows more emotion in this episode, and certainly the romantic side, as she's flirtatious with John, is allows her to at least expand upon that. So I went very solid. In fact, you can't get more solid than the score I gave, which is a solid 10 out of 10 for voice acting.
Yeah, very nice. I also gave it a 10 out of 10 for
nice.
all the reasons you mentioned. And I love the scene kind of early on in the episode when Superman and Martian Manhunter are just talking, and Martian Manhunter is like, "I've never seen this side of you," and like he keeps kind of like accidentally calling him Superman, and is kind of like forcing himself to call him Clark, and Clark's just like, "Yeah, but that's what's great about coming home. Like, I can be myself." And again, that's sort of at the end is what Jean learns. As you mentioned, he returns to his true Martian form at the end when he's singing a song, and that's what I thought that was a nice, sweet moment. And everybody I think in our main cast is really strong this week, and even as you mentioned, all of the great acting Carl Lumbly has to do in this episode. He's also funny in it too, like when he's standing at the Kent's front doors and just deadpan goes, "My name is Jean. I'm a Martian," and Pa and Ma immediately just pull him into the house and say, "Oh," and kind of shrug it off. Like, I mean, this is at the very least the third alien they've met in their lifetimes. So,
right,
so it's old hat to them that yep. Clark would bring some other strange visitor home with him for Christmas. But yeah, it's a really, really just great job all around, and everybody does a good job. And like you said, I think Phil Lamar, who we haven't really talked about much, but he again, like talking about growing up with his grandmother and how much he loved snowboarding and snowball fights and things like that, and and I think he does a good job in his small role as well. So just great. Everybody's great.
Everybody is great. All right. Well, Liam, that will bring us to that sounds like it could be the bonus sound for our bonus point here. Liam, you must have a bonus point.
Yeah, and this is, I don't know, this is a bizarre one to give, but it's honestly what I thought of when I was thinking about it, wrapping up my notes for this episode. Is this episode makes me feel good. I feel like I've said so many times in this episode already, it's what you want from a holiday special. You get the themes of togetherness, of being yourself, and embracing a spirit of generosity and goodwill and joy and peace, and finding yourself. And it's just so great. And like we mentioned, you and I loved this episode, watched it every year before we did a DCAU podcast. I'll still be watching this for years to come, every holiday season. And it's just, I love it so much because it's perfect, and I feel good. And it's not just the nostalgia either, because I think sometimes, as we've mentioned, when we go back and review some of these what we kind of would consider a classic, and we really shove it under that critical lens, it doesn't always hold up quite as well.
Yep.
Doesn't mean we don't love those older episodes still, but I think finding that not only does it have those nostalgia points, but also it succeeds at kind of everything that it wants to do here. It's that's a +1 for me, because it's mission accomplished, and I feel great, and I look forward to watching it every year. It's everything you want in a holiday special.
Well, I think that's enough. That's enough to make it and justification. Not that you have to justify your own point, but I would find it hard to disagree with that. I mentioned to you before we started recording, but I think what's really, really neat about this episode is we so often, and in the prior 84 episodes, there's probably been maybe at least a dozen times where we said, if only this episode had been a 2-parter instead, it would have been given them the opportunity to flesh this storyline out a little more, give a little more background to this character, or, to flesh this point out a little bit more. It's ironic that the Justice League, like we mentioned at the start of the episode, typically every other episode is either 2 or 3 parts in the original Justice League run, and this is the only one that's a half-hour episode, and it works perfectly for it. It didn't need to be a 2-parter. It's self-contained. Like we said, there's not a whole lot that has to do with anything else continuity-wise, but it works so well as a 22-minute episode. Like you said, you wrap it up. You have the feel good at the end of the story, where everybody's story is resolved and everybody goes home happy. Even the villain of the episode, Ultra Humanite, gets not only does he get his redemption story in fixing the toy for the orphanage and making it educational and fun for them, but then he gets his own Christmas tree that the Flash gives him, and his own feelings of nostalgia celebrating with his family. It's so well done. It's such a great episode, and well written by Paul Dini, who perfectly encapsulated, like you said, so many things that are important during the holiday season, and that are important to so many people. I concur with you. So that would bring us to our final score, Liam. Totaling up my points here, I have what turns out to be 34 out of 40. So a very strong episode. What did you total up here?
Well, if this is a pretty easy math one for me, based on the scores I gave. But in fact, for only the 3rd time for myself and the 4th time total in the history of the show, I have given this episode a 40 out of 40. Wow, a perfect score for this holiday episode, Comfort and Joy. Yeah, I for all the reasons we've mentioned, it's it's so perfect, and as we get into wrapping up here, we talk about rewatchability. Yeah, as I said,
I think you've only said it like 4 times so far, but yeah, this is a must see. Just even if you don't celebrate Christmas, even if you don't, celebrate the holidays, or maybe this is a season for you that you don't have a lot of fun during, because that's legit. That's real life for some people. But this episode perfectly encapsulates just, that feeling, and it's a fun episode outside of it. You can watch, honestly, I remember watching this for the first time we watched it was not during the holiday season. So, it's fun because it gives you some depth to your characters, but it's also a feel good and leaves you just kind of like, I don't know, it's a light episode. It's a good palate cleanser too. If you watch like a very heavy episode, and you need something to lighten your load a little bit, watch this episode.
Absolutely. And that'll about wrap us up. But yeah, happy holidays, everybody, and Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah and everything. And thanks for listening.
Yeah, man, it's this will be our next to last episode of the year. We have one more Saturday left in the year of 2019. Liam, why don't you let the listeners at home know what our final Justice League episode will be for the 2019 calendar year?
That's right, Cal, and we are ending with a bang, which is a great pun because the episode involves a lot of bombs. It is, in fact, the episode Wild Cards. And that's what we will be ending the year with. It's a fun plot. I mean, it's one of those things on paper, like, how is the Joker going to take on the entire Justice League by himself? Well, tune in next week and we'll tell you how he did it.
There we go. So that's right. Ending the year on a fun note. It's from my recollection, a very good episode. I've watched this one several times. Be interested to see under the microscope what indeed it looks like. But yeah, don't forget to make sure you guys follow us on social media. We're at DCAU Review, both on Twitter and Instagram. Twitter is where Liam runs our page, sets up polls. We'll hopefully be putting up some stats in the next week or so about some of our favorite episodes of the year, maybe our top ranked episodes, the highest scoring episodes of the year. Breaking those down. We did that last year. That's always fun to check back and see. Plus, let Liam know what you'd like to see maybe in the upcoming year. We have our January schedule planned out. We'll be talking about that next week. We'll give you a preview starting next week on what we're going to cover in January. But we'd love to get your ideas on what we can do in the future. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at DCAU Review. You can certainly check out that. We post the links to the new episodes. There's always a preview posted of this episode or the upcoming episode in the middle of the week, Liam. And definitely want to get those followers up for the new year. But we're so thankful for you guys. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. And we are certainly not done for the year. So make sure you tune back in next week. But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we'll catch you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Happy holidays.